When I saw home bakers folding an entire stick of butter into their sourdough loaf, I knew I had to give it a try because I love butter. The claim is that it's like a giant croissant, only way easier to make. So let's test it out and see how true that actually is. I went with the recipe from the creator whose video I first saw, Amy Bakes Bread. You start by making a levain with a 1:10:10 ratio of starter, flour, and water. I mixed it up before I went to bed, and here's what it looked like the next morning. Then I mixed together the water, starter, flour, I used bread flour, and salt until a shaggy dough formed. Then I let it rest and ferment at least for about 30 minutes. Then I came back and performed one set of stretch and folds, covered and allowed to rest for 30 more minutes. Then I grated an entire stick of cold butter that had been in the freezer for a while. I was surprised that even though the butter had been in the freezer for a while, it started to melt when I was grating it. It was actually more annoying to grate than I expected. So I would advise, if you're making this, to make sure that the stick of butter is completely frozen solid before grating it. Then I scattered half of the shredded butter over the dough. It was also kind of annoying how the pieces of butter stuck together. And then I performed a few sets of stretch and folds. I put the rest of the butter in the fridge to keep it cold while the dough rested. After another 30-minute rest, I added the other half of the butter and folded it in. Then, after another 30-minute rest, I performed one final set of stretch and folds. Then I transferred the dough to a straight-sided container and set aside to proof. I was aiming for the dough to double or nearly double since my kitchen is on the colder side in the fall, winter, and spring months. I find that a 100% or near 100% proof works best for me when my kitchen is colder. But oh boy, I was not expecting this dough to take as long to proof as it did. I started the bulk ferment at around 3:10 in the afternoon, and it wasn't complete until about 1:15 a.m. And I wanted to proof it even longer because it wasn't at 100%, but I had sacrificed my sleep enough and needed to move on to the pre-shape. The problem with this dough is that you can't proof it at a temperature above 75 Fahrenheit or 23 degrees Celsius, otherwise the butter can start to soften too much. So I couldn't put the dough in a warm spot to help speed up the fermentation. After pre-shaping the dough, I allowed it to bench rest for 30 minutes. Then performed the final shape. And transferred to the proofing basket. I decided to go for a batard or oval-shaped loaf. Then I popped the loaf into the fridge and finally got to go to bed at around 2 a.m. The next afternoon, around 2 o'clock or 12 hours later, I preheated my oven and Dutch oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit or 232 Celsius. I turned the loaf out onto a piece of parchment paper. scored it, popped it into the preheated Dutch oven, and transferred the whole thing to the oven, which I lowered to 425 Fahrenheit or 218 Celsius. Then after 25 minutes, it was the moment of truth. I always get so excited when I take the lid off the Dutch oven when baking sourdough artisan style bread. It's pretty much the best part of the whole process for me. I baked it for an additional 20 minutes with the lid off. This smelled so good while it was baking. After it was finished baking, I transferred it to a wire rack. Then one of the hardest parts of the whole process commenced, waiting for it to cool enough to slice into. Here's a crumb shot. It really is such a pretty, soft, but crispy loaf. Now, before I dive in and taste test the loaf, I want to point out that this is not a true croissant loaf, or croissant, whatever you want to say. James Bridges pointed out in a post in the Sourdough Geeks Facebook group, the croissant loaf is an example of viennoiserie, a leavened pastry dough laminated with sheets of butter. This pastry is then proofed and baked in a loaf tin and served as bread. James pointed out that the trendy sourdough croissant loaf is actually more similar to a traditional Scottish bread roll known as an Aberdeen roll, buttery, or rowie, which dates back to at least the 19th century. According to the Slow Food Foundation, legend has it that this product was developed to provide fishermen with a roll that would not go stale during a fortnight or more at sea. The secret was the abundance of fat, which also provided the distinctive flavor and made the rowie doubly useful for the seagoers in that they were a source of energy. I did notice that the recipes for butteries contain lard and sugar, which makes them a little bit different than this sourdough croissant loaf. Also, they're made with commercial yeast, not sourdough. Though the original rolls might have been made with sourdough, I don't know. And now, let's see how this viral sourdough croissant loaf actually tastes. So this loaf smelled amazing while it was baking, and you can tell there's a lot of butter in there because the bottom crust, you can just tell it's very buttery, a bit oily in a good way. The loaf feels very soft. You can hear it kind of crunching as you push on it. It's a lovely sound. Again, smell is amazing, but the true test is in the taste. All right, here we go. It's almost like focaccia, kind of how it's so oily like that. Nice and crispy on the crust. Delicious flavor. Now, would I say that this is similar to a croissant? Perhaps in flavor, I can kind of see it. And as I was doing the stretching folds and as it was baking, it did smell quite a bit like a croissant. However, the texture is pretty much just like your nice, regular, chewy, stretchy sourdough bread. The texture isn't really like a croissant, so I think that the croissant bread name is a little bit gimmicky. I would say that the texture, again, is more similar to a focaccia, which is really good, but if you're like expecting this to be exactly like a croissant just in bread form, that is not really what it is like. Very delicious though, very oily. I think you would get full very quickly eating this. One big advantage to this loaf that actually makes me want to make it on the regular is that you don't have to add any extra butter. And when you have small children that tend to make a mess when they're buttering their bread, this is a big selling point. They can independently serve themselves bread without leaving behind a greasy trail. So for that reason alone, I'll probably be making this again. All right, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and make sure to check out this video next that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumb up. 30-minute rest, I prefer. Please give it a thumbs up